In this episode of the AI Take, we look at where the durable value is for enterprise AI. My thesis is it's in the workflow and the data. The workflow is how you uniquely do business, and that is the differentiator for your business. But the data is what you uniquely know about your customers. And that AI will magnify both those things for you and cannot generate either of those things.
Welcome to the AI Take, powered by 1KE, where in each episode we break down one AI lesson and figure out what it means for you and your business. I'm Sidney from Sydney, and as always, I'm joined by Michael Chanter, CEO of 1KE. Michael, welcome. And what is today's AI Take?
Thanks, Sid. Well, today's take is about where is the durable value in enterprise AI? And my thesis is that it's in the workflow and the data. And what I mean by that is the workflow is about the unique way that you do business, and the data is what you uniquely know about your customers and your business.
Fair enough, but isn't AI, the whole excitement with AI right now about the model? And I didn't hear you mention the model. So where does the model fit into this?
Well, I'd say that the model gives you extraordinary cognitive capability. It allows you to deliver enormous amounts of work very quickly. So certainly there's value in the model, but I don't think that's really where the value will be for enterprise long term. Obviously, in the past, we've talked about how there's convergence in the quality and capability of the models. And, some of the recent data indicates that there's only a 3% gap between frontier models and some of the open weight models. So very, very little to distinguish them. What I think is really the value is what is knowing what good is in your business. Mm-hmm. That's really a differentiator. What's good in your organization?
Cool. So let's, break down into what you mean by workflow and what we mean by the data. So with the workflow, what's so valuable about that?
Well, so workflow sounds like just a bunch of tasks, right? But really, it's not that. It's almost like the crystallized, accumulated knowledge of how your business does something. And in many businesses, that's actually, their differentiator, the way they do things. So, for example, I used to do a lot of work with a hire company, and the way that they delivered service in the branch of the hire company was everything about what differentiated them as a business, right? So I think workflow is essentially the sort of competitive advantage translated into a sort of repeated action for a business.
How well do organizations know their workflow? Do they have a handle on it, do you think, or it's sort of random?
Well, actually, I think people always understand the process broadly, and they have a sort of what I would call an intuitive understanding of it. But translating that into something that AI can execute is still really, really difficult. So many of those little gray decisions that we can make as people, all of those things need to really be understood properly, almost deterministically, before you can engage AI to multiply that, right?
Well, you used a key word there, deterministic, but isn't today's AI model all about non-deterministic? I mean, you run the same prompt a couple of times on a thing and you get different answers, different results.
Yeah, so I think the reality is all of us have experienced that the model's answer may vary from time to time. So what you need to do there is understand what are the points where you need a decision or where you need that cognition, and what are the constraints you put around that, and how do each of those workflows link to the next step and the next step and the next step. So you're right, AI is inherently non-deterministic, but you need a deterministic envelope around that to employ it successfully.
Very cool. Okay, so I guess the second part of your response was the data. So why is the data potentially more valuable?
So I think, well, firstly, the key thing I think is why data is the gold, if you like, or the real value in many ways is that your internal data is not accessible to anyone else. So how you do things, what you know about your customers, that's one thing. There's also market data, which is, external view of the world. Mostly those things, neither of those things are necessarily publicly available. So that if you can have current accessible data about that, that's essentially how you provide real context to the AI, not just broad general sort of knowledge. And that's still fundamentally extremely valuable. So if you think about, for example, the amount of time it takes a customer to do a process, or the average cost of a transaction, or how one solution is more valuable than another, that needs to be all of that needs to be grounded in real information, not publicly available information. And that's why that becomes a sort of, the AI becomes a multiplier on that data, but you need the data to ground it in the first place. Otherwise you have no advantage.
Got it. Is there something you can share with what we've seen building out 1K in this experience?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a learning for us along the process. So when we started, conceptually, we had the idea of building this sort of pre-sales autopilot, and we were able to produce reasonably detailed proposals for our customers. But once we started grounding it really deeply in how the customer operated, what their services are, how they like to operate, even the way that they verbalize their capabilities, as well as really detailed understanding of what technologies are capable of delivering. So that's the sort of public data that I was talking about earlier. Then we're able to deliver what I would call a much high fidelity outcomes, which those outcomes are super differentiated from something you might get just dealing with general knowledge.
Yeah. All right. So wrapping this up, I guess, what's the advice for leaders? Where should they focus and put their efforts first?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is you need to be looking in your business for those workflows that really differentiate the way you do business today. What are the things within your business that you may not even be considering them as workflows, but processes that can translate into workflows that are the differentiated elements in your business? That's the first thing. The second thing is you really need to find and govern the data that underpins those workflows, and perhaps even think about how to improve that data, because as you engage AI to help you in these processes, as we've said before, it becomes a multiplier. So whatever quality you have or lack of quality, whatever clarity you have around workflows or lack of clarity, all of those things will be multiplied and you'll end up with a differential. So that's the last piece, is build the controls that make that sort of probabilistic intelligence really dependable and part of your business.
Great. And so if there's one thing for people to take away from today's conversation and one thing to remember?
Yeah. So the model provides cognition. We understand that. The workflow is where you embed your business process and differentiation. And the data contains what you uniquely know as a business. So the value in AI is really in that workflow and data that is already part of your business. And you need to really understand those things and govern them really well before you multiply them with AI. But that's where all your value is going to reside.
It's really interesting. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, but now it's really exposed you if you haven't got a handle on your process and your data, I think, right? Like, because a long time we've been saying data's your gold, data's your asset, whatever. But now that if others have got that organized and they're now applying AI to it and they're able to accelerate, and you don't have your data and process aligned, I think that's gonna show you up. So
absolutely,
the sooner the better. Very good. So that's today's AI take. Please share and subscribe if you found this valuable, and join us for the next episode, where we always look at one lesson, break it down, and explain what it means for you and your business.